Africa's economy. The International Monetary Fund has left Nigeria out of Africa's list of fastest growing economies, naming Benin Republic, Côte d'Ivoire, Ethiopia, Rwanda, and Uganda as the continent's top performers. According to the IMF, these countries are now among the world's fastest expanding economies, supported by consistent policy reforms, stronger fiscal discipline, and investments in infrastructure and manufacturing. The fund projects sub-Saharan Africa's growth to stabilize at 4.1% in 2025, with further improvements expected the following year. Despite the IMF's upward revision of Nigeria's growth forecast to 3.9%, the country still lags behind its regional peers. The fund says while reforms are yielding results, Nigeria's economy remains below potential, urging deeper structural changes, reliable power supply, and diversification beyond oil to drive sustainable growth. So as other African economies continue to surge ahead, what more can Nigeria do to catch up? Well, we are joined now to discuss this by Olaotan Fawehinmi, who is a marketing communication expert. So thank you so much, Mr. Fawehinmi, for joining us. So,
okay, good. Sorry.
Of course, I understand. Nigeria's growth outlook is improved.
Here. Thank you.
You're welcome. So I'm looking at Nigeria's growth outlook that has actually, improved. But then, according to a report, it remains below the pace of its peers. For you, why would you say, or how do you see it, that smaller economies seem to be outperforming what used to be Africa's largest economy?
Okay. Thank you again. So sometimes size can be a disadvantage. If you look at the size of Nigeria, excuse me, compared to the other countries, the smaller countries that have been mentioned in the IMF list, in terms of size, we are way bigger. And that, in this case, could be a disadvantage because then when you reel out the policies, you realize that the reforms are slower compared to smaller economies. If you look at Rwanda, for example, Benin Republic, for example, they don't have our numbers. They don't have the kind of numbers that we have. So it's very possible that they are more agile, right? So they make the policies, it's quicker to implement them, and then you can see the results faster. Unlike Nigeria, that is quite big. We're talking over 200 million people. So in that case, you can announce all the good ideas, but then you still struggle with execution. You still battle with how you make the policies trickle down to the average man on the street. So when we're talking about that, size could be a disadvantage. And again, secondly, our heavy dependence on oil, it's also a big deal, right? So whatever happens to oil then affects the economy, right? So you see that the smaller economies, they diversified early. They went into agro-processing, agriculture, manufacturing, tourism. Rwanda, for example, is big on tourism. But for Nigeria, we have the resources, we have the number, but we have the talent, but then we're still not able to implement the policies correctly. We're not able to coordinate it. Then there's a big issue with continuity. So these are some of the things that would naturally put those smaller economies ahead of Nigeria in this regard.
Okay, so if you say it has to do with the size of the economy as regards other issues, there are some other economies in other continents that have policies in place that are working. We can use the US for an example. We can use Javier Milei's Argentina's policy reforms that actually transformed the country's economy. What is the problem with those policies, the implementation, and what we have in Nigeria?
Like I said earlier, there's a problem of continuity. So when you're talking about policies, it could work in developing countries. That's the reason it's working is there's consistency. When you don't just reel out policies, it's consistent. You're not policies don't change every 4 years. Do you get it? Look at even apart from even the European countries, even some countries in Africa. Côte d'Ivoire is following that footsteps. Ethiopia is following those footsteps. The policies don't change every 4 years. Okay, policies are not tied. We need to get to a point in Nigeria where policies are not tied to the governments that are currently on the seat. Right. So when we give our policies, let's give long-standing policies that will run their course, whether it is A that is sitting on the seat or is B. And in terms of infrastructure, the countries that you have mentioned are big, they are big on infrastructure. Bring it back home. Look at Rwanda. Look at Uganda. They are building infrastructure. They are building transport. They are building power before they even think about bringing investors. Now, we need to change that, because here we're talking big about bringing foreign capital into the country, but then we still have the basic things that make a country work. We're still lacking in those regards. Our power is still not doing fine. Logistics is still not best. Our ports still have issues. So when we fix those things, that's when we can see a difference. That's when we can compete favorably with other African countries and even countries in the West. And finally, it's not so easy to do business in Nigeria because of lack of infrastructure. So it's way easier in Kigali, for example, to register a business or to run it smoothly than you have in Lagos. The reasons we all know. So if we are able to fix some of these things and get infrastructure right, you see our local entrepreneurs will do well. It will affect the economy before we are now thinking of chasing after foreign money or foreign capital.
Okay, so you talked about the fact that there are issues around infrastructural development. We understand.
Yeah.
You also mentioned the issue around policy implementation. Why is it hard to implement policies in Nigeria? Does it have to do with internal sabotage or the lack of mechanisms to monitor progress or to evaluate situations? What are the challenges when it comes to implementing our policies?
So the truth of the matter is, whatever policy at any level, whether at the federal level, state level, local government level, whatever policy that is being rolled out, it has to be followed through. The issue that I see with Nigeria right now is not that we don't have the right policies. It's not that we don't have a government that thinks about the people or means well for the people. I think what the problem is following through the policies. All right. So I remember saying this earlier in the week on another interview on TV that it is very easy to reel out policies at the top, at the high level. But then how does it get down to the man on the streets, the average man on the street? It's implementation, it's following through, it's ensuring that when it comes from the top, it comes down to the state. From the state, it is well implemented. It goes down to the local government. From there, it is well captured. It goes down to the LCDAs. And then it goes down to the wards. And then each and every person can have a feel of it, right? So if we're not, like I said earlier, if we're not dealing with the real issues, which are the lack of infrastructure, lack of power, the fact that it is very, very difficult to do business, the fact that we are heavily dependent on oil, we don't pay attention to other sectors that can build the economy, that can build individuals, build families, and build the economies, such as agriculture, such as manufacturing, such as tourism. If we're not looking into all of those things and building policies that will, if I look at the entertainment, look at the tech industry, the creative industry, we're beginning to see green light in those areas, but not so much is being done in these areas to actually help the economy grow. So that's why you see that policies they're not effective, because we're not, at the end of the day, we're not facing the right channels and making sure that whatever it is we're doing is having a national effect on the economy. At the end of the day, you just see that we could have bunches of growth, and then we could have the big numbers, but at the end of the day, does it translate to economic growth, which is what IMF is saying right now. It looks like the inflation has stopped. I wouldn't say it has reduced, but it's not going up. But at the end of the day, is there real growth in the economy? I don't think so.
Okay, so even as we wrap up on this, I'd like to also take your thoughts as regards IMF's concerns with Nigeria focusing on domestic borrowing rather than going to the IMF and, of course, the World Bank. Now, it is saying that also needs to be addressed if we're going to have a stable economy, and, of course, how that would affect investor confidence and the business ecosystem. What's your take on that?
Let me be honest with you. That's a valid concern, right? When domestic borrowing is heavy, it affects investor confidence. Okay, but bear in mind that even if you look at the local banks, our commercial banks, they would rather borrow to the government than to private sector, to small businesses. I don't know definitely because one, you have to play to the gallery. Two, you are ensured that the money is safe, you can get it back. But then at the end of the day, impact the growth of the private sector. Because then again, the taking the money, getting the money back will still affect the businesses, because then you now have increased interest rates. Okay, because it's going to the government. What it will then do, it will reduce productivity because you are not borrowing to private sector. It will affect job creation. At the end of the day, we will have issues when the government is doing more of domestic borrowing, and when we cannot see the effect of the borrowing, when we cannot see visible, tangible growth that ties to the borrowing, then investors will have a problem. Investors' confidence will be tampered with. That's my take on it. I won't say don't borrow. I would say borrow smart. Let the direct loans translate to productivity. Let it translate to job creation. Let's see the essence of the borrowing. And at the end of the day, it can naturally just affect investor confidence. And they can say that we can see more traction in terms of investing in the economy.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much, Olaotan Fawehinmi, for sharing your thoughts with us on the news.
Thank you. Thank you so much.